Hello and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, June 11th. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, Asa Winstanley, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 979 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, Israel's global standing is collapsing. Ali will discuss the findings of a new Pew Research survey of tens of thousands of people across 36 countries. Meanwhile, Israel and its lobby are responding not by ending the genocide, starvation, and massacres, but by pouring record sums into propaganda and possibly more sinister schemes. Later on in the program, Jon will cover week 14 of the battle in South Lebanon as Hezbollah's armed FPV drones and anti-tank missiles exact a deadly toll on Israeli troops, and while missiles from Iran and Yemen respond to U.S. and Israeli ceasefire violations. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine and Lebanon. In Gaza, Israel carried out massacres against children, families, fishers, and police officers as the humanitarian situation continues to deteriorate with no end in sight. On Tuesday, Israel abducted 9 fishers while they were working off the shores of Gaza City and Deir al-Balah in central Gaza, amid ongoing targeting of fishers and restrictions preventing them from earning a living and feeding their community. The abductions come after a young fisher, Mohammed Musa Abu Jiyab, was killed by Israeli naval forces who fired live ammunition at him while he was fishing off the coast of Deir al-Balah on June 7th. According to the Gaza Fishermen's Committee, at least 238 fishers have been killed by Israel since October 2023, and 90% of the fishing infrastructure has been destroyed by 2.5 years of genocide. Israel has also banned the entry of fishing boat engines and equipment into Gaza. In an undated video, Mohammed Abu Jiyab had shown off his unique fishing technique in which he dives into the sea and tows a fishing net wrapped around his waist.
اللهم صل عليك يا محمد. ايوه بدهم يعلموا علينا. ايوه علم عليهم. شد. ايوه شد يا.
On Monday, June 8th, reporter Mohammed Al-Qumsan filmed an Israeli helicopter gunship opening fire directly into a densely populated residential area in Gaza City. According to local reports, at least 8 Palestinians, including several small children, were injured in the attack on the Tal al-Hawa neighborhood. On that day, at least 7 Palestinians were killed in a series of Israeli strikes across Gaza, from the north to the south. In Jabalia refugee camp, 3 Palestinians, including Jad Suleiman, an 8-year-old boy, were killed in an Israeli airstrike on the Anwar Aziz Square. Jad was killed in the attack while he was on his way to school, according to his family. His father, clutching Jad's little blue backpack, sat and wept beside his body. The boy is gone, he says. There is no power or strength without God. There is no God but God. The boy is gone, Yahya. Jad is gone. Our wonderful Jad is gone. This clip was filmed by reporter Hamza Kureka.
راح الولد راح لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله لا إله إلا الله راح جاد يا يحيى راح جاد يا يحيى راح جاد كل ما شاء الله على الولد راح الولد راح يا عمل بده دائما بده قطعة نمورة من عند عمه من النمورة الحمراء.
In al-Mawasi Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, at least 2 Palestinians were killed and several others injured in an Israeli attack on Monday that targeted a group of civilians. Our contributor Ahmed Al-Najjar reported that it was the second attack on the same area that day. Earlier, 4 Palestinians were injured in an airstrike, he said. Wafa news agency reported that several Palestinians were wounded in a strike carried out by Israeli reconnaissance drones along Salahuddin Road in Deir al-Balah in the central Gaza Strip, also on Monday. On Sunday, June 7th, a 15-year-old child, Abbas Abu Jabal, was playing football in the street west of Gaza City when Israel attacked a nearby car. The child was killed in the airstrike. Our contributor, Mahmoud Assad, filmed the funeral procession his family and community held for Abbas. At least 3 other Palestinians were killed in the attack, according to the Wafa news agency. Citing medical sources at Al-Shifa Hospital, Wafa reported that an Israeli drone fired a missile at a civilian vehicle and nearby pedestrians close to Al-Burak School in the Nasser neighborhood, northwest of the city. On the same day, Israel bombed a police security post in Al-Mawasi, killing at least 5 and injuring 17 others. Footage captured by reporter Badr Tabash shows crowds of Palestinians in the busy intersection where the attack took place, with dead and wounded people lying on the ground and being transported in the back of motorcycle-driven carts. Israel has systematically targeted police and security personnel and their vehicles and posts in an effort to cause societal chaos and undermine safety protocols around Gaza. On Saturday, June 6th, a 7-year-old child, Mariam Kadum, was killed alongside her father in an Israeli airstrike on a displacement shelter in the Rimal neighborhood of Gaza City. 4 other Palestinians were killed, and at least 3 other children, including a toddler, were injured in the attack. Photographer Saeed Jarras filmed grieving family members who gathered at the morgue at Al-Shifa Hospital to bid farewell to Mariam and her father, quote, amid scenes of profound loss and heartbreak. That evening, our contributor Ahmed Al-Najjar reported that, quote, Israeli warplanes bombed a house surrounded by displacement tents at the heart of Al-Mawasi in western Khan Yunis. The occupation issued a prompt terror evacuation order before the strikes. He posted photos of the aftermath of the airstrikes in the morning. Quote, this is the aftermath of last night's Israeli strikes on Al-Mawasi. Hundreds of Palestinians are now without shelters because Israel continues to rain down its missiles on Palestinian tents, despite the so-called ceasefire. In Gaza City, Al Jazeera's correspondent Hani Mahmoud reported that at least 5 people were killed when Israel fired 2 missiles from a drone at a wedding tent, quote, not only immediately and directly killing and injuring people inside the tent, but also there was shrapnel that flew at a very high speed into the surrounding area. And next door to the displacement sites at an UNRWA school that is packed with displaced families, and many injuries were reported from inside the classrooms where people are sheltering. Close to 15 injuries with different degrees of severity were reported, he said. The day before, on Friday, June 5th, a 25-year-old man, Mohammed Ferwana, was killed in an Israeli bombing on his home in Khan Yunis, the day that he was supposed to get married. A child was shot in the head by an Israeli sniper in the Al-Mahata area east of Gaza City on Friday. Reporter Abdallah Kamel captured video of the injured child receiving care in the hospital, bandages covering his head and his clothes soaked in blood. Ahmed Al-Najjar reported that at dawn on Friday, a young Palestinian woman was murdered and 15 displaced Palestinians were wounded by a bombing from an Israeli helicopter gunship on makeshift tents in crowded Al-Mawasi, Khan Yunis. The Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza said that as of Wednesday, at least 981 Palestinians have been killed by Israel since the fraudulent ceasefire was declared in October 2025. Dr. Hussam Abu Sofia, the pediatrician and director of Kamal Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia, who was abducted by Israeli forces in December 2024 and has been held in detention ever since, was transferred to solitary confinement in Nafha prison this week, which his family says is Israel's retaliation for his lawyers submitting an appeal to the Israeli High Court for his release. Dr. Abu Sofia, as we have been reporting, has been subjected to extreme torture and medical neglect by Israeli prison guards since his abduction a year and a half ago, and is being detained without charge or trial. Dr. Abu Sofia's son, Elias, who is also a physician, told the Guardian newspaper that, quote, the only accusation is his refusal to obey the Israeli army's orders to evacuate the hospital and leave the patients to their fate. Elias said that the family was told that the solitary confinement cell is no larger than 1 meter square. Speaking to the New Arab this week, Elias said that, quote, about 2 months ago, my father spoke with me and asked me to carry his voice to the world. He asked me to reach out to the late Palestinian journalist Anas al-Sharif and ask him to remind people of our case, believing that Anas was still alive. That moment never leaves me, a man so isolated from the world that he does not even know what has happened beyond his prison walls, he continued. Anas al-Sharif, a young father and correspondent for Al Jazeera, was hunted and murdered by Israeli forces in August 2025. On Wednesday, Dr. Abu Sofia appeared at the hearing for his appeal by video link from the prison cell. Reporters screen grabbed an image of the doctor, who looks frail and has visible marks on his arms. As of airtime, the court has yet not made a decision on his appeal. Dr. Abu Sofia's attorney, Nasser Oda, stated that he remains in solitary confinement without any clear explanation other than, quote, security-related claims put forward by the Israeli authorities. Oda added that, quote, despite repeated requests by his legal counsel for appropriate medical care, Dr. Abu Sofia has not received any treatment. He continues to suffer from back pain resulting from physical abuse during his transfer and is still experiencing ongoing vision and eye problems. On Wednesday, Oda relayed a message from Dr. Abu Sofia to reporters, quote, I am a pediatrician providing medical care to patients, the injured, and the vulnerable in the Gaza Strip. I carried out my work in accordance with international law and humanitarian standards. My detention is an unjust and arbitrary imprisonment. Dr. Hussam Abu Sofia is one of 14 Palestinian doctors from Gaza currently being jailed by Israel without charge. Turning to the occupied West Bank, Israeli soldiers killed a 7-month-old baby in front of his parents in the city of Al-Khalil on June 5th. Sam Abu Haikal, who had probably only just begun to sit up on his own and eat solid food, was in the car with his parents who were driving home from a visit with family members in Bethlehem. His aunt, Samah, told Mondo Weiss that there was an Israeli patrol near their neighborhood. Surprised by their presence, Sam's father, Fahed, stopped the car suddenly and the soldiers raised their rifles. Quote, one of them fired a single bullet that struck the steering wheel and broke it into fragments, sending shrapnel into the car, she added. The shrapnel struck little Sam in the face, killing him, she told Mondo Weiss. Fahed was filmed by reporter Sohaib Wiwe while he carried Sam's little body in the hospital elevator.
بس عمي بس بس لو سمحتوا لو سمحتوا تحملش ان شاء الله ان شاء الله خذ عبالك نعم ان شاء الله الله يرحمه والله يصلحوا حوالي يحموه.
Sam's mother, Dania Salame, was wounded by another fragment that hit her in the neck, while Fahed was wounded in the hand. Samah said that Dania was still in intensive care when she learned that her infant had been killed by the invading Israeli occupation forces. Speaking from the hospital to Al Arabi News, Danya recalled the moment the Israeli soldiers opened fire on their car. Quote, "I was sitting in the back with my son in my arms. The bullet hit my husband's hand and my son's head and me. My son was only 7 months old. He died. I went to him and found him covered in blood. I ran with him through the street. Someone found me and took me quickly to the hospital. A few hours later, he died. My son was martyred," she said. In the northern West Bank on Wednesday, the Israeli army forced Palestinians in the Jabal al-Salehin neighborhood near the North Shams refugee camp in Tulkarem to leave their homes for the day in order to conduct what they called military exercises. Locals told the Anadolu news agency that the military ordered residents to open the windows in their homes for the exercise, as the army dispatched armored vehicles and heavy bulldozers into the nearby North Shams camp, which has been under Israeli siege since early 2024. During an invasion into the town of Aqraba near Nablus on Wednesday, an Israeli military vehicle ran over a Palestinian teenager, Wafa reported. After running over the 18-year-old, the soldiers prevented ambulance crews from reaching him, sources said. Local reporters captured video of the youth being transferred into a Palestine Red Crescent ambulance. On June 7th, a 14-year-old Palestinian child was wounded by Israeli live-fire shrapnel during an ongoing Israeli military raid on Balata refugee camp east of Nablus, according to the Wafa news agency. The Palestine Red Crescent Society reported that the child sustained shrapnel injuries to the head and was transferred to hospital for medical treatment. Earlier in the day, Israeli undercover forces infiltrated Balata camp, followed by the arrival of several military vehicles. According to local sources, soldiers raided a commercial shop, detained a number of young men inside, and surrounded a house in the camp, Wafa added. Israeli forces continued their offensive throughout the day, deploying snipers on rooftops, surrounding and raiding homes, forcing residents to evacuate at least one house, and searching commercial establishments. The United Nations Human Rights Office this week stated that, quote, "raids, search and arrest operations, and other operations by Israeli forces have become a regular occurrence, with more than 20 raids or other operations on average each day across the West Bank during the first 5 months of 2026. A Palestinian woman was expelled from her home by Israeli forces in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 south of Al Khalil on Monday. Reporter Saheb Wiwe recorded footage of the woman, who says she was given no time to gather even her clothes. The media collective Translating Palestine said that, quote, "her home is one of hundreds raised under a system in which Israel makes building permits nearly impossible for Palestinians to obtain across Area C and East Jerusalem, then destroys the structures it deems unauthorized. UN figures show this is not isolated. More than 620 Palestinians were displaced by demolitions in the first months of 2026 alone, roughly 160 families every month, the highest rate the UN has recorded since it began tracking in 2009, after a record 1,700 plus families ethnically cleansed in 2025 and over 13,000 between 2009 and 2022. Rights monitors described these demolitions alongside Israeli colonial settler terrorist attacks and movement restrictions as engineering a coercive environment designed to push Palestinians off their land, the media collective added. In the village of Taibe, near Ramallah, on Tuesday night, Israeli settlers committed arson on a massive area of cultivated Palestinian farmland. The town's mayor told the Anadolu news agency that residents heard gunfire around the targeted area, preventing them from reaching the fire to extinguish it. The settlers remained in the area until Israeli forces arrived, he said, adding that Taibe, like other Palestinian towns east of Ramallah, faces repeated settler attacks aimed at forcing residents to leave their land. Taibe is one of the few Palestinian towns in the West Bank that still has a Christian majority, according to church and local accounts. Residents say the town's historical Christian presence dates back to the earliest days of Christianity itself. The attacks do not distinguish between Muslims and Christians. The occupiers want the land without its people, the town's mayor said. In recent months, the town has seen a series of settler attacks, including fires set around the historic Al-Qadr church, assaults on residents' property, and racist graffiti, local officials told Anadolu. Other settler attacks were reported in Nablus, a village near Ramallah, the town of Nahalin, west of Bethlehem, and in Tubas this week. In Lebanon, Israel issued a forced displacement order for the ancient city of Tyre, or Sur, in the south on Tuesday, including all neighborhoods and Palestinian refugee camps, affecting nearly 44,000 people, many of whom were already displaced. On Monday, an airstrike near a Lebanese Red Cross center in Sur reportedly killed 5 people and injured 8 others, including 4 paramedics, the UN said. On June 8th, our contributor Roqayah Chamseddine reported that Israel targeted South Lebanon with a massive wave of bombardment, hitting over 50 distinct locations, at least 28 airstrikes, 3 drone attacks, and 19 cases of heavy artillery. For more on the situation on the ground in Lebanon, Roqayah filed this report for the Electronic Intifada on Wednesday evening.
This is Roqayah Chamseddine reporting for the Electronic Intifada. The Israeli air campaign across southern Lebanon has intensified to a catastrophic degree, marking arguably one of the most violent escalations since the phase of the aggression began on March 2nd. The South is being subjected to sustained, systematic bombardment, explicitly targeting residential quarters and vital civilian infrastructure. This onslaught has focused heavily on the historic coastal city of Sur and the surrounding 𝐓𝐡𝐞 countryside. The crisis in Sur escalated drastically on June 9th when Israeli warplanes launched a wave of heavy strikes on densely populated residential areas, including the Al-Masakin neighborhood and surrounding villages. According to Lebanon's Ministry of Health, these initial attacks killed at least 8 people and wounded more than 30 others, with rescue teams forced to dig through the rubble of flattened buildings for survivors with their bare hands. Immediately following these deadly strikes, Israel issued an unprecedented blanket forced evacuation decree for the entire southern city, ordering residents to flee north of the Zahrani River. Crucially, this order explicitly targeted Sur's historic old city and its predominantly Christian quarter for the first time. The Christian quarter, which is a dense, ancient seafront district of stone houses, churches, and heritage sites, had previously been excluded from these threats and had served as a vital sanctuary for thousands of families seeking refuge from forced displacement. This specific targeting of the Christian quarter represents a dangerous operational shift. Last week, the Israeli military leveled unsubstantiated claims that Hezbollah resistance fighters were operating within the neighborhood, offering zero evidence, while explicitly demanding that local Christians force the resistance to leave. This constitutes a blatant psychological operation designed to soak sectarian resentment and fracture Lebanon's internal unity by weaponizing the local population against its own defense. On the same day as the devastating attack on Sur, a succession of Israeli air raids across more than a dozen locations brought the daily death toll in the south to at least 14. These strikes intentionally choked transit routes, rural outskirts, and adjacent emergency facilities, effectively paralyzing medical and rescue responses. Since March 2nd, the total nationwide death toll from Israeli attacks has surpassed 3,600 people, with over 1 million residents forcibly displaced from their homes. Israel's campaign has also deliberately targeted those tasked with the national defense and emergency relief. Earlier this week, an Israeli strike in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 killed 3 Lebanese army personnel, including a senior military officer. This brings the number of Lebanese military personnel killed since March to at least 30. Today, South Lebanon is trapped in a constant cycle of forced displacement and aerial bombardment. Medical teams warn that the systematic bombing near clinics and hospitals has pushed the entire southern healthcare network to nearly a total collapse. The escalation in Israeli aggression reflects Israel's inability to achieve decisive results against the Lebanese resistance on the battlefield, pushing it to escalate strikes further against residential and civilian areas across southern Lebanon.
That was Roqayah Chamseddine reporting for the Electronic Intifada from Lebanon on Wednesday. We've published many features in the last week, but today we're highlighting A Long and Precarious Journey to Play Soccer by Botena Hamdan, writing from Ramallah. She writes about a 12-year-old child, Yusuf Jubran, who she says, quote, has had a unique passion for soccer since he was very young. Every day, he spends hours playing football. He rarely lets the ball leave his feet. When he walks from one room to another, he often dribbles the ball with him. He's a member of a club and trains 4 times a week. He keeps a notebook of soccer moves, best shots, and tactics. His wardrobe is full of football jerseys, and his room's walls are covered with pictures of his favorite team, Spain's Real Madrid, and his favorite player, Cristiano Ronaldo. I know all this because Yusuf is my son. We spend nights talking about all this, but nothing is straightforward, even for a football-crazy boy when you live under military occupation. In the summer of 2024, we had to disappoint him since his father and I couldn't afford a trip to Barcelona with his team. So this year, when he finally got a chance to travel with his club, the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Stars Academy, to Aqaba in southern Jordan, he was very excited. The trip was scheduled for January 7th, but even the best laid plans are complicated by instability and uncertainty under Israel's occupation. As the trip neared, Yusuf grew more excited. His coach chose him to wear number 7, just like Ronaldo. Then, after receiving the itinerary for the trip, he insisted he would swim in the Red Sea in Aqaba, despite the cold weather. Like most Palestinians in the West Bank, Yusuf is unable to visit our sea. Palestine may lie on the Mediterranean Sea, but with most Palestinian coastal cities occupied, depopulated, and repopulated by Zionists during the Nakba of 1948, and the Gaza Strip occupied in 1967 and cut off from the West Bank for decades, it is almost impossible to get to for those Palestinian residents in the West Bank. Yusuf asked several times if the trip might be canceled. He was growing fearful that his dream might not come true. I encouraged him to stay positive and accept any delay. He tried to look calm, but failed. I am dreaming to travel, to play soccer in the whole world, he said. He also had a different motive. I want to come back home, curious to see the reactions to the gifts I will bring, just like you when you return from a trip with special presents for everyone, he added. I was touched by his generous thinking. Thank God for this lovely child. On January 14th, we had to get ready in the dark to be in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 town center by 5 a.m. It should take just half an hour to drive to Jericho, but it is always sensible to add extra time in case of unexpected military checkpoints or road closures. Israel dramatically expanded its already ubiquitous network of military checkpoints and roadblocks throughout the West Bank after October 2023. As of December 2025, per the latest UN count, there are 925 checkpoints or roadblocks permanently or intermittently restricting the movement of 3.4 million Palestinians in the West Bank, including Jerusalem. Yusuf came back full of life and experience. When he showed me some photos he took there, I also saw a new talent in him. I was so impressed with his photos of the sea, I even printed some to decorate our living room. Everything here restricts us and shrinks our children's dreams. Israel has killed hundreds of athletes, mainly in Gaza, during its ongoing genocide there. One of the most disturbing bits of footage from Gaza was when Israel bombed a group of displaced Palestinians while they were playing football in the yard of Al-Auda School in Gaza in July 2024. Beyond the violence, restrictions on movement prevent athletes from moving freely inside Palestine or abroad. Even our national football team, which made the quarterfinals of last year's Arab Cup and were one win away from reaching a mini tournament to qualify for this year's World Cup, faces extraordinary challenges. The players are scattered across different continents and cannot train together regularly, while home games are played in Jordan. For its part, Israel organizes games on stolen Palestinian lands in illegal settlements, and despite repeated complaints by the Palestinian Football Association, attempts to ensure an international boycott of Israeli sports teams has so far not borne fruit. Under military occupation, the simplest opportunities for young athletes, taken for granted by children elsewhere, are transformed into a long ordeal of permits, checkpoints, delays, and endless hours of waiting. Yet our story continues with a quiet resistance that refuses to give up. Yusuf was sad when the journey ended, but he continues to play, smile, and dream of traveling again. It is a form of freedom. With every kick, he overcomes what stands in his way. A stubborn Palestinian footballer is on his way. Those are excerpts from A Long and Precarious Journey to Play Soccer by Botaina Hamdan, writing from Ramallah on electronicintifada.net. Botaina is a Palestinian writer and a refugee from Anaba village, destroyed in 1948, who writes on cultural memory and heritage under war. And now, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and reclamation across Palestine and around the world. In Gaza, a young rollerblader, Akram Sharif, showed off his skills this week. He says, "They took my hand and my foot, but I'll never stop playing." This was filmed by fellow rollerblader Mohammed Saad. And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. What a week. What a
God.
week of utter horror.
Yeah.
979 days.
Yeah.
Almost 1,000 days of genocide.
I'm always speechless, but this is just just that footage of the Apache helicopter shooting 2 missiles into the crowded Tel El Hawa neighborhood in Gaza City a few days ago in broad daylight, shooting the baby in the head in the West Bank. When is enough? Who will stop this?
Real Palestinian babies will never get as much sympathy as imaginary, non-existent, beheaded,
right,
or baked
Israeli
babies who don't exist. What can we say?
I know.
We keep on, and it's good to see everyone here today, and thanks to everyone for sticking with us and sticking with Palestine and not refusing to forget or to be silent.
That's right.
I still have Ahmadinejad's words ringing in my ears from last week. Keep talking about Gaza, keep talking about Palestine, and that's what we're here doing.
That's right. Yeah, and elsewhere, outside of the West, people are talking about Palestine. People are still, in the streets and sanctioning Israel where they can, and not allowing Gaza to be forgotten. And there is I wanted to segue into this discussion that we're going to have now about Israel's standing around the world.
Good news story for a change.
It is a good news story. It's a little mood lifter after the news report. And then of course we'll go to Jon, and then we have a group discussion about what is going on in terms of potential hot war restarting again with Iran. But I wanted to talk about the piece you wrote this week. Let's just get into it. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman here with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Donald Trump reportedly told Benjamin Netanyahu something unusually blunt in a recent phone call. "Everybody hates Israel," he said. The president was apparently pressing the Israeli prime minister to halt Israel's massacres in Lebanon. But as Ali, you write in your latest article for the Electronic Intifada, Trump's remark lines up with what a new Pew Research Center survey shows: Israel's global standing is collapsing. Pew surveyed tens of thousands of people across 36 countries and found that large majorities in most of them now hold unfavorable views of Israel and have little or no confidence in Netanyahu. Meanwhile, Israel and its lobby are responding not by ending the genocide, starvation, and massacres in Gaza or Israel's aggression across the region, of course, but by pouring record sums into propaganda and, in some cases, calling for far more sinister measures against those who expose Israel's crimes. Ali, take us through the main headlines from the Pew study. What did you find?
Thanks, Nora. Well, just to be clear, Trump was obviously not taking any sort of principled position when he was asking Netanyahu to stop the massacres in Lebanon. It was because that is a condition Iran has imposed for any kind of meaningful negotiations with the United States. Still, even so, Israel's most important backer, Donald Trump, appears to understand the scale of Israel's crisis. Across the 36 countries surveyed, a median of 67% of adults have an unfavorable view of Israel. Only 25% have a favorable view. Israel is facing a crisis of global legitimacy. And in only one of the countries surveyed, that was Kenya, did favorable views of Israel hit 50%. Everywhere else, favorable views were below half, and in many, far below half. The highest unfavorable views of Israel were in Turkey at 97% and Pakistan at 95%. I know we have some friends watching today from Turkey, so we send them our greetings. And if we have any friends from Pakistan, we greet them too. But the most important point is that this is not confined to Muslim-majority countries or countries historically more critical of Israel. There is broad rejection. And the Pew survey shows this is getting worse for Israel. In 13 of the 24 countries where Pew has trend data over time, unfavorable views have become more common since last year, and in some cases, much more common.
And one thing that really stands out is the gap between governments that keep backing Israel, of course, and the public that increasingly reject it in those countries. What do you make of that?
I think this is one of the most important points, particularly when we talk about the West. European governments and the European Union continue to shield Israel politically, to promote trade and diplomatic relations as Israel continues this genocide in Gaza and these massacres in Lebanon. But their own publics are moving in the opposite direction, which really highlights the crisis of democracy across the so-called West. In Sweden and Spain, 78% view Israel unfavorably. In the Netherlands, 76%, Italy, 75%, and Germany, 73%, more than the UK at 69% and France at 68%. In Spain, Italy, and the Netherlands, large majorities view Israel unfavorably, as I've just noted, and about half the population has a very unfavorable view of Israel. So in some countries, the negative views of Israel are even more intense. And Germany, as I noted, is especially revealing because, of course, Germany famously treats support for Israel as state doctrine, Staatsräson, as they call it, just a requirement of the German state. But Pew found, as I said, that almost 3/4 of Germans view Israel unfavorably. up from 64% last year, and favorable views of Israel among Germans have fallen to just 23%. So all those jackbooted Berlin police beating pro-Palestinian demonstrators is not succeeding in making Israel more popular, apparently. And what we can see is that this fanatical support for Israel from the German state and German elites is not a democratic consensus. It's an elite project imposed against the will of the public. And that's true across the West. In general, Western governments act as if support for Israel is the natural position, but in reality, it is an unpopular minority position, and it's getting more unpopular every day.
Yeah. And of course, as we've seen for years and years, it's usually the younger generations in across the board in demographics that are growing in their rejection and repulsion of Israel. Can you talk about the younger people? Pew also breaks this down by age, and that seems, especially important for where this is heading.
It really is. And again, this is a trend that we've seen in survey after survey. And what the Pew research gives us is more of a global look than just looking at specifically one country. But yes, this is, I think, the most important long-term finding. In North America and Europe especially, younger people are much more negative toward Israel than older people. So in the United States, 74% of people aged 18 to 34 view Israel unfavorably, compared with 49% among those aged 50 and up. So that age gap is enormous. In Australia, 87% of 18 to 34-year-olds view Israel unfavorably. In the UK, 78%, Canada, 76%, Greece, 76%, and France, 74%. So that tells us that Israel's position will only deteriorate with time because the older pro-Israel consensus is fading away. A generation has seen nearly 3 years of live-stream genocide, children torn to pieces, starvation, mass graves, destroyed hospitals, bombed homes, schools, and tents. All the horrors we see week after week, Nora, that you show us in the news report, and no amount of hasbara, no amount of Israeli propaganda can make people unsee all of that.
Exactly. And your article also connects this shift in public opinion to the Israel lobby's record spending, especially here in the United States. And of course, the Israeli government has said that it's going to spend, hundreds of millions of dollars more to try and launder its image. What's happening here?
Yeah, Pew actually carried out an earlier survey in April that focused more on the United States, that found that 60% of Americans now hold unfavorable views of Israel. That is up from 53% last year and almost 20 points higher than in 2022. So we're seeing really a historic shift. And among Americans under 50, we see that majorities in both parties view Israel unfavorably. So it's becoming more and more, whereas support for Israel used to be bipartisan, now opposition to Israel is becoming bipartisan. So again, among that under 50 age group, 84% of Democrats and 57% of Republicans now view Israel unfavorably. And that's why the Israel lobby is panicking. And we've seen this play out in recent elections in the United States. So just a week or two ago, AIPAC, the major Israel lobby group, successfully unseated Republican Congressman Thomas Massie in what was the most expensive primary campaign in history. Of course, Massie was a target because he was a rare Republican, elected Republican, who criticized U.S. funding for Israel's genocide in Gaza. He explicitly calls it a genocide. And the lobby really moved in to crush him. That would have been unthinkable a few years ago for AIPAC to spend such huge sums of money to defeat a Republican. And that's why I also think, of course, we've talked about this before, the election of Zohran Mamdani as mayor of New York City last year is really a key indicator. He won despite, again, enormous spending by billionaires and special interest groups to back his pro-Israel opponent. So public opinion is shifting decisively, and the lobby is trying to use massive spending to defy political gravity. They will win some tactical battles, as they did in the fight against Massi, but we're going to see more cases of them losing, as well as they did against Mamdani. But the long-term trend is not in their favor.
Yeah. And one of the most revealing parts of your article is what Ron Lauder, the billionaire president of the World Jewish Congress, said recently at a conference in New York. Let's play some of that, and then you can react to that.
Brigade of young, attractive, and articulate Israelis. Their faces and their voices should be recognized around the world. They should be on screens every single hour of every day. They should work overtime to make the case for Israel and Canberra. The Arabs may have oil, but I know Israel has an abundance of smart, handsome young men and women. They should be recruited immediately. Their presence and their works are just as important as the Golani Brigade or a squadron of F-35s.
So much to unpack there, Ali. I'll let you do it. What is he really saying there?
Well, what he's doing is what we hear from Israel lobbyists and propagandists time and again, year in, year out, that Israel's problem is a branding problem, that it's not doing marketing well enough, and he thinks that $1 billion ad campaign or propaganda campaign, including what he calls a brigade, note the military language there, of young, attractive Israelis will turn things around. And the idea is a grotesque one, which is that Israel can market and brand its way out of genocide with better looking, better sounding spokespeople. But he doesn't just stop at slick propaganda, he goes further. And we actually have another clip from his speech at that same conference, which coincided with the Israel parade in New York earlier this month, which Zohran Mamdani became the first mayor in decades to refuse to go to. So this conference was around that time. This clip is a bit longer, but I think it's really important for people to really hear what Ron Lauder is saying here.
The Jewish state is facing rockets of disinformation every minute of every day. There is no less a campaign to destroy the country. And it's coming from TikTok. It's coming from mainstream media, from the BBC, from CNN. It's coming from each posting, each headline, each fake photo of a starving child in Gaza. And these lies are no less dangerous than the rockets heading towards Jewish homes. And they are constant. Israel must create a new Iron Dome to not just fight this never-ending cascade of lies, but it also must go on the offensive. There should be a completely new and vitally important government operation with a new director, not just a political appointee, but someone who knows PR and news backwards and forwards. It should be a separate building. It should have a $1 billion budget. Some of the $1 billion should come from Jews in the diaspora. Diaspora Jews should partner with Israel in this PR fight, because in the end, it won't be just protecting the Jewish state, it'll be protecting the Jewish people worldwide. And Israel should use its excellent intelligence services in this fight. The Mossad and Shin Bet are second to none, and they must know where these lies are coming from. It just makes sense to use them in this fight, and it should be one day in, day out. When Israel is hit with lies, Israel should hit back twice as hard. Its response should be furious. It should counterattack every single hour of every single day, and no institution should be spared.
Good grief. Again, so much more kind of military speak. He's also, I mean, just the bigotry is, I don't even know where to begin. What is Ron Lauder actually calling for when he talks about, you know, $1 billion budget to counteract, you know, what people are seeing on their phones every day, live streamed from Gaza?
Well, he's calling simply for more censorship and repression. And by invoking Mossad and Shin Bet, he may even be contemplating illegal action, sabotage, and subterfuge. Of course, Mossad and Shin Bet are Israel's spy agencies and are directly involved in torture, kidnapping, and assassination and other criminal activities. And Lauder is saying there very openly that they should be used to fight those who spread what he calls lies about Israel. And as you heard, one of those so-called lies he identifies is that children were starved in Gaza, which, of course, is the indisputable reality. So when he talks about Mossad and Shin Bet going after lies, what he's really talking about is targeting journalists, researchers, human rights workers, and anyone else who documents Israel's crimes. And of course, we know that this is exactly what Israel already does. You'll remember our conversation a couple of weeks ago about Fatou Bensouda.
Yeah.
She recently revealed that when she was the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, she faced direct threats to herself and her family from agents of Israel.
Yeah.
And so what he wants is censorship, repression, and more control of the media. And one recent example of that, of course, that we've talked about is Israel propagandist Barry Weiss, who was put in charge of CBS News. And now the headlines in the last day or so are that Barry Weiss is going to be given, you know, this completely talentless know-nothing whose only qualification is that she is a Zionist who, as a student in Columbia, as a college student at Columbia, worked to censor and try to get professors fired who weren't, you know, fanatically as pro-Israel as she was. Now she is going to be also put in charge of the editorial control of CNN as well. So this is all because other Zionist billionaires, Larry Ellison in this case and his family, who took over Warner Brothers and CBS, and now also going to take, and TikTok are going to take over CNN. So this is what Ron Lauder wants to see more of, but there's no sign that at least until now, that it's bearing fruit.
Yeah. And not just it's not just Ron Lauder calling for this massive increase in hasbara, but Israel itself is also massively increasing its official propaganda budget, as I mentioned. What's the scale of that? And Ali, can it work?
Well, yeah. So Israel's 2026 budget, which was just passed recently, includes around $730 million for hasbara, which is the Israeli term for official propaganda. And that is more than 4 times what Israel spent the previous year. It's also creating a new so-called public diplomacy unit inside the foreign ministry. And while the spending is unprecedented, none of these tactics are new. Every few years, Zionist think tanks and consultants conclude that Israel needs better marketing, and slick, expensive campaigns are put together to pinkwash or greenwash Israel, to present it as a sort of a fun-filled vacation destination or a pioneering technology hub. You know, all that propaganda we've heard for years about Israel inventing cherry tomatoes and how we're hypocrites for using mobile phones because Israel invented everything we use. So the propagandists claim. But even the Jerusalem Post, which is even in Israeli terms, a right-wing newspaper, quoted public diplomacy experts casting doubt on whether this can work. And the reason is obvious even to them. The problem is not that people have misunderstood the message. Israel's problem is that too many people understand the reality. People are turning against Israel because they can see Gaza, they can see apartheid, they can see the starvation, they can see the mass slaughter and the settler terror, they can see the fanatical racial and religious supremacy that Israel stands for. So, of course, none of this really historic shift means that Israel's power has disappeared. It still has US weapons being airlifted night and day, the US veto protecting it in the UN Security Council, European and Arab complicity, and of course, billionaire money and a huge propaganda apparatus. But the legitimacy of that system, of Israel itself, is eroding. And that's why I think the panic is so visible.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that. Of course, your article is called "Trump Told Netanyahu the Truth. Everybody Hates Israel." And we'll link to that and to the Pew Research Center survey. So yeah, go to electronicintifada.net to check that out and read more of the details and the data there. Thank you so much, Ali. Let's bring up Jon for the resistance report. So while these hundreds of millions of dollars are going into trying to repress information and threaten journalists and make sure that, that Israel's message is laundered, Hezbollah is actually fighting Israeli propaganda through drones. So tell us about what's coming up as you cover South Lebanon.
Yeah, more drones. They have cameras on them, so we get to see all of those operations, but they're only a fraction of the overall operations of Hezbollah. We'll show some other of their operations as well, but it's been remarkable how Israel still has no solution for this, and so the future portends more FPV drones.
Yeah. And what week is this?
Week 14.
Amazing. Incredible. All right. Well, let's go to your report, and then we'll come back and talk more about the regional situation.
All right. You are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report on day 979 of Israel's genocide in Gaza and day 102 of the battle in South Lebanon. I'll be covering Iran later on in the program, but let's start, as always, with Lebanon and this map that's still a pretty useful map. I reported last week that the Israeli military admitted that they had withdrawn 3 of their divisions that were fighting inside Lebanon. They were particularly on the coast in Nakura area that you see, Bayada. We watched them leave those places more or less. Similar in Bint Jbeil, they don't want to have their troops sitting ducks to these FPV drones that Hezbollah is using. But the real vector for the past 2 weeks has been, if you follow the blue line around up the Galilee Panhandle to the top where you see Metula and Yahmar, that is the zone of battle. Yahmar is right near the Beaufort Castle. You can see the elbow of the Litani River there. It's only 4 kilometers from the border of Israel, but Israel made a big deal of it being crossing the Litani. But you can see clearly by this map why it's not that big a deal compared to where the Litani is north of, say, Bint Jbeil. So that is where we're going to be focusing today. Let me show you another couple new maps that I pulled for you. These are NASA topography maps, which I think when you watch these videos, you know that it looks like this, but I thought I'd bring NASA topography to bear on this day's show, so you can see the significant mountainous and valleys in this area that are fighting. The main operations this week are in the upper left corner there, Zautar al-Sharqiya, and then Yahmar, and then to east of Yahmar is the Beaufort Castle, which you can see on that cliff-faced edge there on the topography. Also, you can see on the right-hand side, it's not ideal the way the border is marked, but you can see the dotted line that is the blue line that marks Israel from Lebanon. If you could see down to the left there, you see a town of Markaba. This week, a unaffiliated lone wolf rode his motorcycle from Beirut down to his village that had been ethnically cleansed and destroyed. And he crossed the border into Israel, scaled an Israeli military observation tower, and fired with a handgun on Israeli troops before he was killed. So that definitely shook up the Israelis. They've been, touting their military successes in the south, and somebody was able to enter Israel into the Galilee, enter Israel in the way that Israel had been fearing for decades. But that was a lone wolf operation. So I thought I'd bring that to you. In the next slide, we zoom in a bit so we can get a better look at the topography in these towns. So there you see 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 on the left there. And you see Yahmor on the right, and just above it in that open space with the high ground on the topography, that is the Beaufort Castle. So these are the areas that we will see these operations for this program. Let's take a look at the first operation, an anti-tank guided missile strike. We haven't seen as many of these on camera. These are dangerous operations. They don't have cameras out for them as much, and we haven't seen Almas anti-tank guided missiles that were used in the earlier rounds that had cameras on board. But here you see the Kornet anti-tank guided missile crossing multiple kilometers here to target that tank that you see. This tank is going to intercept part of the missile. You can see the burst from its shotgun blast there. But the Israelis admitted that the tank commander on that vehicle was killed in that strike. So obviously the shape charge made it through and torched that tank. That was one of 5 Israeli soldiers killed in the first 6 days of the month. Here we're looking at what we're going to see for the next 20 minutes or so. Just to remind you what we're looking at with these FPV strikes, first person view means they have a camera on board. You can see the battery pack on top, all component parts that can be, many of them could be built, 3D printed. Underneath, you see the PG-7BL, the warhead from the RPG. It's a 93 millimeter warhead. It's a significant single charge warhead, anti-tank warhead. And underneath that, at the very bottom, you see the spool of fiber optic cable. We're not sure what percentage of operations are fiber optic and what ones are radio, but the fiber optic ones cannot be jammed, and they give low latency, sort of instant communication with the pilot and the vehicle. And so those are part of the success of these operations and part of the reason why Israel is so vexed in trying to come up with a solution for them. So that's what you're going to be looking at for the next little while. Let's look at the first operation, number 6. This is a 4 times FPV strike over the course of about 2.5 hours in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 this past week. Again, every video that you're going to see for this entire program has been published by Hezbollah in the last week since you saw me. That is the case every week, but sometimes it's good to just remind people. So this is a reconnaissance flight. This is one of the tools that this drone has, is that when you're coming in on your target, you can basically case the village and find, as you see here, each of their emplacements, where they've hidden their vehicles. And here's the strike on a Namr troop carrier with an engine compartment open. You can see on the right there, that's the engine has been taken out of that vehicle, obviously being repaired, maybe from a previous strike. In any case, here you see it burning. This is the drone following up 30 minutes later. So this has been on fire for 30 minutes. Hezbollah is showing you that is the Namr that was just hit there that you can see. And so that's a battle damage assessment by FPV drone number 2. And then it'll carry on to its target here, the Merkava tank. And he's going to go underneath the netting and the sticks. I think they've been big on sticks for the last couple weeks that are super protective from anti-tank warheads. So he struck that. Now we have FPV-3 here. He's going to hunt another tank that is pretty well covered. That one is one of the better concealments that we have seen for these vehicles, but the drone doesn't care about your concealment. It just flies around the back and targets the vehicle from behind, right in the door, in the weakest part of the vehicle, the most target-rich spot to hit the tank. So all of the effort that the Israelis put into shrouding that tank in sticks and netting, and that was even tactical netting. This is tactical netting too, so it's at least better netting than the fishing nets. But again, aiming for the rear door there, that you can see they've covered the tank with an Israeli flag to helpfully identify it while also concealing it. Contradictory there. 4 operations, 2 against Namers, 2 against Merkavas in Zautar al-Sharqiya over the course of a 2.5-hour window, one after another. The first flight gets the reconnaissance, gets the target acquisition, and the others follow up, knowing where to go and where to strike. Let's look at number 7, because this is just this is the single strike on the Namer. You can see the engine open. Maybe we'll loop that one more time around. You can see the engine open there. You see it burning 30 minutes later. Here you can see the engine compartment open. So any kind of compartments being open are going to lead to your vehicle being torched. The warhead explodes, creates shrapnel and explosive material inside the vehicle, which lights it up. Let's take a look at number 8 here. This is over the base of Jabal Blat. I have reported on this a number of times. This is one of the 5 forward bases that Israel installed inside Lebanon during the ceasefire. We've seen operations here at this, what seems like a totally abandoned base all the time. Where's the soldiers? We got a long reconnaissance flight over to see where the targets are, to see if anyone is there before coming in and striking a Merkava tank here that also has a hatch open, which is probably going to make a significant mess, as we saw previously with the Namer. There you can see it identifies the tank again under netting that will protect this tank if the drone falls from the sky directly down. But they don't do that. They fly under the netting. They identify the tank in his little netting garage, and then strikes right at the open driver's hatch. So this is sort of the new soldiers in the window from Gaza, if people remember back when the Israelis used to hang out in windows. The second half of the genocide, they've been leaving their hatches open and paying the price for that, or leaving doors open so that their commanders can be hit. So that is the hit on the open hatch. We can see that on the next slide. There you see it open. That's the driver's hatch, and the engine is in front of him there. And he has access to the cabin from his seat as well. Let's take a look at number 8. This is a series of 3 FPV drones. What you see there on the left is a smoke screen put up by the tank to conceal the dismounting of the troops. So there you see the soldiers dismounting out of the tanks and vehicles, moving into the building. So that smoke screen would also be a good cover if the drones fell directly down from the sky, but they don't. They fly around it and come down on ground level and appear to strike that group of soldiers. This is the second FPV drone coming in to the same area. Again, these are often spread out by 20 minutes, 30 minutes. He's going to pick a tank here. Sorry, he's going to pick a Namer here and hit that in the rear. Again, you can see the netting all over that. And then now we can see, again, the burning from that strike. This is the third drone catching the battle damage about 40 minutes later. And you can see that all around that tank, that strike created a fire. Whether it did inside the tank or not is not clear, but it doesn't portend promising outcomes when everything around it is burning. So you see that from the third FPV drone. Battle damage assessments. This is what people wanted to see, a second drone that records the damage. This was part of an operation the same day, 3 APCs and 1 tank hit. Let's take a look at number 9. We're going to get a thermal camera image here. Night attacks. Again, the Israelis had moved their operations to night, believing that Hezbollah didn't have thermal capabilities on their cameras, and they denied it until the very last moment last week, after 4 videos came out in the same day that I showed you last week. And again, consistent targeting, going for the rear door of the tanks, the weakest spot. So we're seeing really a concentration of targeting data being shared across the front line with these Hezbollah drone pilots, because these attacks are hitting the same spots, and those are the spots that you want to hit. Let's take a look at number 10 versus a Humvee here in the riverbed. Again, it's Outer al-Sharqiyah. And you can see this is a Humvee with communications. It's probably a command vehicle. You can see it bristling with antenna here. And the back is usually full of that type of gear. You can see the antenna there. And a direct strike on that Humvee that destroyed it. The Humvees have no chance against this anti-tank warhead. And you can see the computers in there as well, too. So command vehicle in Outer al-Sharqiyah. Let's take a look at 11. This is versus a D9. D9s and excavators have been pulled more or less from Lebanon. This was the only one this week, and 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿 said that the military has sharply reduced the use of heavy machinery such as excavators and bulldozers, which had become easy targets. So that's obvious, and they were destroying them in significant numbers. And so now Israel's ability to do demolition operations in areas where they're not fighting have dropped, because they don't have guards for these vehicles. These vehicles were getting taken off the battlefield in significant numbers. 12 logistical vehicles in the last week alone taken out of the battle. We can take a look at number 12 now. Again, this is a two-strike operation. You can see the 2 tanks facing head on here, aiming for the turret gap on these is what the fighters are attempting to do. Looks like that was pretty close. And again, as soon as the warhead touches something, it ignites the molten dart that sends it into that underneath the turret gap, which is a weaker spot. This is a second drone, same operation, minutes later, usually 30, 45 minutes later, according to field reports. Presumably when the Israelis are expecting them one after another to keep them spread out like this, keeps them preoccupied. This is one of 19 FPV anti-tank strikes in the past 2 weeks. 6 of them were this week. This operation dates back to the last days of May, so the last 2 weeks. There's been 19 operations, again, FPV operations against tanks. Let's take a look at number 13. This is a tank that's guarded by sticks. You can see when it gets in close, it's going to hit it on its skirt and protect it. The protective sticks didn't work very well. I don't know what they think they're getting from that, but there's the sticks. There's a good shot of the sticks, protective sticks, volleyball nets, fishing nets. They're just winging it. Let's take a look at the next one, 14, against the logistical vehicle. Again, we were talking about these. They're targeting these vehicles is a significant target. This is a fuel tanker. So all the tanks that run out of fuel very fast, are based around this single 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fuel tanker. Maybe there's multiple ones, but this fuel tanker is going to be exploded, and we have seen battle damage from these. They blow sky high. Obviously, you put an anti-tank round into the middle of a fuel tank and you get quite a spectacle, but you also get that off the battlefield. And like I said, 12 logistical vehicles targeted this week. So double the number of logistical vehicles than tanks this week. So something to keep in mind as we go forward. And watch this one around again. You can see the way he picks the target and then comes back around, looping around, gets his balance. Instead of just diving down instantly on the target, he can get his altitude set, he can get his balance set and allow for better targeting. So these are all battlefield adaptations that we've been watching Hezbollah gain over the course of this battle, and now they are extremely effective in these strikes. So that is this is up near Beaufort Castle as well, all in that area. These operations are all in the same area this week, everything we're showing you. Let's take a look at 15. This is a drone navigating through airstrikes and what appear to be artillery strikes. That massive plumes an airstrike, but the secondary burning there, that is probably a barrage of artillery shells, which is how Israel operates. Again, these don't have much impact on the drones. The drone just flies through it, comes back down around the other side to strike the tank. And this is also this week. This operation was one of the 6 anti-tank operations with FPVs, but with anti-tank guided missiles, there was 10 operations last week against tanks and 7 this week. So the same number of anti-tank guided missiles being used as FPV drones. FPV drones get all the attention. Let's look at 16. If you look in the upper left there, that's Beaufort Castle. And you can see in the foreground that Israel has bombed and destroyed this area, presumably did that in the hours before that tank moved into the area. That's how the Israelis operate. And a direct hit there on the turret top. Not sure that's the most ideal place. That's a pretty heavily armored place on the tank. But we can see that it was a direct hit for sure. So are we on 17 now? This is those were the anti-tank operations. These are the rocket operations that also don't get much attention. 89 last week and 83 this week, so nearly 200 rocket operations. This is a 32 barrel that they just showed you, a 32 barrel Katyusha launcher, Grad rocket launcher, 122 millimeter Grad rockets, but Iranian versions of the Grad rockets. And basically any rocket of this size in Lebanon has always been called a Katyusha. So you can see these barrages against Israeli troop positions. And again, 83 of these this week. And that's number of field reports. That's not number of missiles fired. So this operation that you're watching here with 32 rockets heading out, that just counts as one field report. So just to keep that in mind, we get another one here that's a bespoke Hezbollah launcher. So we see here an 18 2x9 of also Grad rockets on the back of like a bongo van, like a commercial, a lightweight commercial truck. But it does its job here. And this is an 18-barrel launch versus IDF troop positions in Odessa on Monday night. 89 of these operations last week, 83 of them this week. And these are the backbone of the operations against Israeli troop positions, which keeps them under fire and in shelters and off of the battlefield effectively. That gives you a shot of the last one, but I give you a still in this next image to show you the bespoke truck launcher doing its job. That is not a military grade vehicle, but it does the job. And Hezbollah has been using these vehicles, repairing these vehicles, keeping them in the battle for this entire fight. So I wanted to bring those on. And also number 20 here, one-way attack drones. We don't have a lot of time to cover these every week, but these operations, I try to bring them in every week or two. These operations, Syed 107, attack drones. These are one-way attack drones, suicide drones, kamikaze drones. They're programmed the destination there, and they're very accurate. And they are constantly being fired at Israeli troops. Last week, 28 separate operations. This week, 45 separate operations. And you can see that this is a six drone swarm. On the field report, that counts as one operation. So this is one of 45 different operations. So you're talking, hundreds a week of these are being launched, and you can see the fighters there setting them up. So that is Lebanon. And just to say a last word, Hezbollah spoke this week about Iran responding to Israel's attacks in Beirut. Hezbollah said on Tuesday that the Iranian missile response to the Zionist entity in defense of our Lebanese people is a message of moral, political, and field-level commitment from the Islamic Republic toward Lebanon, after this enemy, with full cover from the American administration, persisted in committing its crimes against our country and resumed violations in the southern suburb of Beirut within the framework of its continuous violations of the ceasefire agreement, confirming its disregard for all international agreements. And now let's take a look at Iran. Again, a lot of fighting this week around the Strait of Hormuz, which you're looking at here. Iran on the north of the map there, the UAE and Oman on the, actually both sides of those are Iran. That's Qashm Island. That's the area around there, Bandar Abbas, Qashm Island. That is what has been targeted primarily by the Americans. They're saying they're firing at radars, even though Trump goes 10 times a day for the last 2 months saying that they have no radars, but apparently they do. Obviously they do. But Trump's lies always catch up. So those strikes all around, responding to what the U.S. said was responding to an Apache helicopter that was apparently shot down by a drone. Iran did not take credit for that operation. CNN said that it was a Shahed 136 drone, and that just doesn't seem likely unless it was like literally crossfire. The Apache flew into it, so unclear, but the Iranians are not have not claimed that operation. The Apache crashed into the water off of Oman and was rescued 2 hours later by an unmanned surface vessel. So the Americans didn't send rescue forces into the Strait of Hormuz to rescue their pilots. They sent a drone boat to get them, to bring them out to a safer area to be put on a ship. So I think that is somewhat telling. We can take a look at the next slide, is also the Strait of Hormuz, which gives you a better sense of the way that the coast works and how small this area is, but also just the advantage that Iran has over these over the Persian Gulf countries. Kuwait was hit, Bahrain was hit repeatedly, and Jordan as well. In these, Ali al-Salam air base in Kuwait was hit. Muwafaq al-Salti air base in Jordan, we know that was the one before the war that was bristling with F-35s. There wasn't even enough room on the runway for them. The refueling aircraft for this week of battle have been taking off from Ben Gurion Airport in Israel, using them as human shields, which Israel always does. And Iran has said that their core position has been the same from the beginning, that the ceasefire is a ceasefire on all fronts of the axis, unequivocal. And so when Israel bombed Beirut, Iran responded by attacking Israel. And when they attacked Israel, they attacked the airbase from which the attack on Beirut took place from. And so, again, Iran is responding to every violation. They're targeting appropriately within a rules of engagement that they're setting out with the understanding that this ceasefire period is going to be a protracted period of time. There's a deal in 3 days is not true. The negotiations for this will take months. And so Iran has been certain that they're not going to lose their strategic advantage by having these attacks take things that are being negotiated on off the table because of Israel's facts on the ground or the Americans' facts on the ground. And that is the way that Israel has always done this. Trump said this week, boasted this week, that 200 commercial vessels had crossed the strait in the last more than a month, which would normally be 4,000. So it's a 95% reduction in transits through the Strait of Hormuz. Trump would probably say something like 12,000% decline. Let's take a look at some of these missile operations. This is what we have seen for a while. That's an EMAD, medium-range ballistic missile. These are they've done heavy lifting during these strikes. You can see them go off in barrages. These strikes were on Kuwait and Bahrain, the Ali al-Salam Air Base, and the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, and also key radars in Bahrain at the Sheikh Issa Air Base as well. You can see those go up. Those are what we are used to. We've seen more than 100 of these now in the past 4 days of this exchange of fire that we've been seeing. And this next one, 33 now. This is the Iranian Navy, the National Navy, the Islamic Republic Navy, launching anti-ship cruise missiles. That's the Ghadar anti-ship cruise missile you're going to see. And here you're going to see an unseen Shahed drone that we haven't seen before. This is the Denai. There you see it launched there. And they said that those were launched at the USS Mason, the USS Truxtun, guided missile destroyers, and pushed them out. They were warning shots, the Iranians said, and fired also on the USS Tripoli. And the USS Tripoli is where the Marine Expeditionary Unit is stationed. And so the Iranian Army said, or the Iranian Navy said, that these were warning shots to push them further out of the strait. After this, we can look at 34 and see the launch of the 𝐓𝐴𝐵𝐿. Solid fuel that you're seeing here looks a lot like the Palestine 2 being launched. So we're seeing the same missiles that we watched during the war. They're being launched in batches between a dozen and 30 each day. So more than 100 missile strikes along with drones have been fired this week. This was fired at Ramat David Air Base, and that is the air base where the operation in Beirut took place from. And we know from the Ramat David Air Base that the IDF was touting 100% interception rate like they always do, and it's always a lie. But open source information showed damage at a warehouse that was the home of the Israeli Air Force 157 Squadron, which is based at Ramat David Air Base, and it specializes in electronic warfare using armed and reconnaissance drones. So that target was hit. The Israelis had to admit it. Again, the satellite pictures we get from Israel are extremely hard to read because they're so low resolution. Let's take a look at 35. Part of the strikes that Israel retaliated with was hitting petrochemical, hitting the the Mashar petrochemical complex, the biggest in Iran. Immediately, Israel goes to civilian targets. And so Iran said, you'll regret doing that. And they launched, these are Ghadr ballistic missiles in this launch, and they were launched towards the Haifa refinery. So again, Iran not allowing, staying in control of the escalation ladder and escalation dominance here, firing on logical targets, unlike the Americans hitting water installations or the Israelis hitting national petrochemical refineries. The Americans have said that they have tried to keep their strikes to radar installations and are trying to not kill people. So it doesn't seem like the Americans really want an escalation. I don't think they have anything to gain by an escalation. They already lost the first war. It's not like if you add another 20 days of war, the Americans will win. It's actually the opposite. The Gulf states are in a position of virtual existential battle should the war expand to them. And so this is certainly not a position where the U.S. or Israel has the upper hand. Of course, Israel wants to destroy the ceasefire because they want to continue their genocidal rampage with full U.S. Support, weapons, and money. Let's take a look at 35 now, because they also got another Reaper drone. This is another Reaper that we've seen. And on this show, this is now about 50 that I have shown you between Yemen and Iran. The Americans indirectly admit to at least 30 being lost to Iran, and we know at least 25 lost to Yemen, and almost all of them on camera in some way. And one last thing, again, number 36, Yemen joined the battle this week as well, because it's a ceasefire on all fronts. If it's not a ceasefire on all fronts are going to participate. Here's a Palestine 2 ballistic missile being launched at Tel Aviv, presumably being launched at Ben Gurion Airport, which is usually the target there. This was launched by the Yemenis. The Yemenis also announced that they had closed the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb. The Red Sea is closed to Israeli shipping, but that's been happening for 3 years. And I pulled this paragraph from 𝐓𝐡𝐿 in January talking about the closure of the Red Sea to Israeli shipping. And 𝐓𝐡𝐿 said, each morning, port workers arrive to empty docks, ready for ships that never come. Revenue that once totaled 240 million shekels a year has fallen to zero, while state assistance amounted to just 15 million shekels, according to port authorities. The port activity came to a halt in November 2023 after Houthi forces seized the vessel en route to Eilat. Shipping companies, including NYK and Zim, subsequently stopped sending ships to the port. The shutdown followed a record year in 2023 when about 150,000 vehicles, that's mostly a vehicle port, 150,000 vehicles passed through the port, and now it's zero. And that has happened either way. So Yemen announced that, but that was already a military objective achieved by the Yemenis. So that has been the Resistance Report on day 979 of Israel's genocide and day 102 of the battle in South Lebanon.
Thank you, John. Sticks and volleyball netting, open hatches.
Battlefield awareness is lacking,
apparently.
But yeah, the netting, as predicted, is not going to win the war.
No, they're scrambling.
It reminds me one of my favorite stories when I was a child that my mom used to read me was The Big Bad Wolf. And what was it? There was a house of straw, a house of sticks, and
House of Bricks.
A house of bricks. So that's what went through my mind when I was watching that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what they're thinking. It's possible
Yeah.
that they're thinking through their drones, their larger drones, that if you're directly over top and you have some concealment by trees or by tactical netting, that it's effective. But with the FPV drone, they're just flying at ground level. And so there's really nothing these nettings can do except prolong the operation and drastically limit the scope of the operation, because they're constantly putting this netting up to protect their positions instead of being on the battlefield.
And it really does underscore, we've been hearing this from Ukraine, that war is just completely being transformed. War should become obsolete, obviously, but unfortunately it's developing. But all these big hunks of metal that the Israelis have look so obsolete.
Yeah.
When you have these highly maneuverable, cheap drones. And seeing that picture of the drone where we can see the spool and the warhead, the warhead hanging off it, which it's so minimal, and they have to use so much metal to try to protect from it. You can't even leave a hatch, a little crack open. They're in an unenviable position, which is, I suppose, exactly where the people of Lebanon would want them to be.
Yeah, no kidding. Let's zoom out a little bit and talk more about what Jon was talking about at the end there, what's happening in Iran. Ali, you had written some notes here. Can we assess the level of what's changed and what hasn't? Every few days it looks like the hot war will resume, and then it cools off. Where are we at this point with in regards to the U.S. Israeli joint aggression against Iran and Iran's position?
Well, that's the question, of course, and I think what Jon has just shown us is that Israel is not in a good military position against Lebanon, and the United States is not in a good military position against Iran. And so the big picture is that since the U.S.-Israeli aggression on February 28th, the picture has not really changed. Whatever happens tactically, they can bomb a radar here or a water storage reservoir, as the United States did just bomb in Iran, which supplied 20,000 people in a very dry region with temperatures now around 40 degrees Celsius. That's what the U.S. is targeting. Well, they can do that. Iran probably can't prevent every such attack. But the United States really has no obvious winning move. They can escalate. They can destroy more infrastructure, as Donald Trump is threatening today as we speak to attack energy facilities. But Iran can and will escalate further. So we have a situation of mutually assured destruction. Of course, it's not going to be the United States itself that's destroyed, but it would be its vassals in the region, and more importantly, the energy infrastructure on which the world depends. So Trump keeps saying every day or every other day that, an agreement, we have the world's most beautiful agreement, it's a perfect agreement, and it's going to be finalized, in 2 days, in 3 days. We have Barak Ravid of Axios singing the same song. But really, negotiations are impossible. Yes, they can exchange messages, but negotiations are impossible because the United States cannot admit defeat, or it cannot make the concessions it has to make. And Iran will not give up its gains, especially control over the Strait of Hormuz. So the core contradiction here is that the U.S. is still the most dominant outside power in the region. It's still the global imperial force, but its ability to actually impose its will is dwindling. Its bases in the region have been pushed back, are being battered, as we just saw during the previous round. What was it? 13 bases basically put out of business. Its navy is effectively useless. The navy has to stay hundreds or thousands of miles away from Iran. And in the 40 days of intense fighting, the U.S. severely ran down its stocks of air defense missiles, which cannot be quickly replaced. And as we said since the beginning of the conflict, Iran is gaining strength over time. It's not necessarily a linear process. And yes, it is costly for Iran. Thousands of Iranians were killed. Undoubtedly, the Iranian economy is struggling in many ways. But strategically, Iran still has the upper hand in a long conflict that exposes the limits and weaknesses of American and Israeli power.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about Israel's role in all of this too. I mean, one of the stipulations that Iran is rightfully demanding to end the war is also to end regional aggression by Israel, and that includes Lebanon and Gaza. And Israel would rather bomb Lebanon and Gaza and be bombed in response than not bomb and not be bombed. That seems to be, I mean, that's its ethos since the beginning of the state project. But it's, you know, Israel has this compulsion to keep trying to force the Lebanese and people in Gaza into submission and surrender. You know, how do you see the U.S. Israel, you know, alliance at this point? Is the U.S. even able to restrain Israel, to really tell Israel to stop bomb? I mean, where, you know, it's I feel like we're in maybe an interesting paradigm at this point for that relationship.
Yeah, the one measure of Iran's power is its ability to insist, to tell the United States there's going to be no agreement or no serious negotiations without a ceasefire in Lebanon, without a ceasefire in all the fields where the resistance is active. And the US understands that, which is why Donald Trump tells Iran, you know, stop bombing Lebanon or don't bomb Beirut or whatever it is, but does Israel. Tells Israel not to do that, but does not follow up by imposing his will. But from Israel's perspective, it's a nightmare to have its so-called freedom of action, something that Israel, you know, their doctrine, freedom of action, we can do what we want, where they want, to have that dictated or limited either by the United States or Israel, either by the United States or Iran, excuse me. And so it's a measure of Iran's growing strength that it can impose those conditions. The obvious problem in the negotiations then is that the US has to restrain Israel, but there is no evidence that Trump is willing or able to do that. And the US and Israel have failed to break the connection between Iran and the axis of resistance. In fact, the bond is getting stronger, as we see with Lebanon and, of course, Yemen now becoming active, as John was talking about. But I think the big picture is that, yes, Israel is acting wild now, as it always does. It is carrying out massacres in Gaza and Lebanon. Don't be surprised if they bomb Yemen again. Of course, they did bomb Iran in recent days. But the big picture is that Israel's position is also weakening over time. And that's because Israel's existence depends entirely on US dominance in the region. And there's really no way to replace that. Local alliances with other US vassals in the Gulf cannot replace US support. which is under pressure both internally and externally. Earlier in the program, we were talking about the historic shift in public opinion in the United States away from support for Israel. This is becoming less popular and less politically viable. And externally, the fact that the US military power cannot anymore impose American will across the region. So as the US retreats or loses its freedom of action, Israel becomes more exposed. And I think regardless of any tactical developments, the balance of power is shifting against Israel.
And let's look at the economic situation as well. I mean, there were some predictions earlier on in the war that the global oil supply, the energy supply, would be, kind of incrementally dwindling by certain dates, by certain, markers. It's kind of obscure what's happening there. It hasn't been as bad yet as many people feared, at least in the US. But in other parts of the world, there has been rationing for months. I'm thinking about in India, for example. I think cooking gas is virtually non-existent anymore in certain parts of that country. So can you talk about the oil reserves, global economic impact now, and maybe what can be predicted if this drags on?
Yeah, this is very interesting because there were a lot of predictions that by April, by May, by June, we would be seeing, a severe energy crisis. And in some ways, as you said, Nora, it hasn't looked quite as dire. Again, in some countries, it is worse. There is more rationing in parts of Asia. But in the United States, we saw gas prices shoot up, gasoline, petrol prices, shoot up to, at one point in Chicago, they were over $5 a gallon. In fact, they are still over $5 a gallon in Chicago.
Like 2010 prices here in California.
Yeah, and in California, they're very high. Yeah. But over the last few weeks, they've actually been drifting down a bit. And in some parts of the country, they're now under $4 again, which is can make people think, well, all this is going away. It's not so bad after all. What has been happening, I think, and this is what the evidence says, is that really the crisis is being delayed by simply drawing down reserves. And those are commercial reserves that exist. Oil companies have big storage tanks or tankers at sea and so on, and strategic reserves, which governments hold. And the latest report from the United States Energy Information Agency talks about this. It says that global production since the start of the US-Israeli attack on Iran has gone down by 11 million barrels per day compared with pre-conflict levels. That is a significant drop in production, which the Energy Information Agency says has resulted in large global inventory draws to meet demand. So the US government says, quote, "We expect global oil inventories will fall by an average of 6.3 million barrels per day in the second quarter of 2026 and 7.6 million barrels per day in the third quarter. Oil inventories in the OECD countries, that's, so-called developed countries, oil inventories in the OECD countries in our forecast fall to their lowest level since 2003. They also say another limiting factor has been there is already an economic slowdown, and that is helping to stretch the existing supplies. So they say high fuel prices, reduced fuel availability, and government initiatives have lowered oil demand. As a result, we now forecast that global oil demand will decrease by 1.1 million barrels per day over the course of 2026. But the effects are real. According to the U.S. Energy Information Agency, diesel and jet fuel wholesale prices rise the most, more than 60% in 2026 and 40% in 2027, compared with their predictions before the conflict. And they expect, more significant increases to come. And this plays out in inflation. And yesterday, the U.S. got one of its worst inflation reports in a while. Consumer prices have jumped 4.2% year on year in May. And most of that is due to rising energy costs. So rising inflation means higher interest rates and more pressure on the U.S. and global economy, especially for the U.S. This has political consequences as the midterm elections come up. So the key point is that the energy situation may look stable in the short term, but while that underlying cushion of reserves is being depleted, a prolonged war is, it just makes the economic and energy situation inevitably worse. Eventually, you run out.
Yeah. Trump said yesterday, I love inflation. Inflation's great.
He did say that, yeah.
Incredible. So why, what happens now? This impasse, this political impasse, the economic impact, how dangerous can this get? As belligerent, U.S. superpower, as a superpower, with Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio calling the shots, and Israel, of course, doing what Israel has always done, which is try and expand, the bombing campaigns of its neighbors. Where could this go? And what should we be looking at very carefully right now?
Yeah, I think that both Iran and the United States, I think for Iran, they know that time is more on their side. Again, it doesn't mean that they don't suffer and pay a price, but Iran's strategy was always to export the costs of the war, to say to the United States and Israel, if you attack us, it won't be us alone who suffers. You will make the whole world suffer. And so Iran is waiting for that energy clock to tick to the point where the cost for the world economy, for the United States, becomes unbearable. And the United States has to basically acknowledge reality. Trump is just hoping, it just is waiting for something to come along. I don't think they have a strategy except to wait. But as time passes, I think, as I said, American power recedes from the region. Israel becomes relatively weaker and more vulnerable. And the energy and economic risks which have been delayed, that bill will start to come due. However, I don't think people can just say, well, that means it's a path to Iranian victory, or the US is inevitably going to be driven out of the region, because the US is a wounded superpower. That makes it extremely dangerous and unpredictable, especially if it is staring defeat in the face. So while I agree that with Jon that the US doesn't want and cannot afford a return to the full-scale hot war that we saw from February until April, we may get that anyway, because Trump and the US state may prefer to gamble everything on that than to admit defeat.
Yeah. Jon, did you want to add a note to that?
No, I think that if Americans get into a war, it's not going to go well for them. The Iranians, the degrading of their military is wildly exaggerated. and we saw like Ali said, the stores of American and Israeli missile interceptors. They can't tolerate a long war, and they can't change. They can't change anything with that war because Iran is not going to. They're resilient. They're not going to give in to force in negotiations, and we've seen that in many different ways that Iran has negotiated. And I think that that's the main factor is that the commander in chief is an unstable, fool who doesn't know what he's talking about and thinks he can use his big, beautiful military any way he wants. And the truth is that they can't, and they haven't been able to. If they could run warships through the Strait of Hormuz, then they would have done it. So, I don't see what the U.S. I mean, I always wonder where the people in the Pentagon are telling Trump this, like, you can't win this. But he, I think this last week has been just dictated by Trump based on interviews that he does 4 or 5 times a day. When a journalist asks him a question and he says, we're going to hit back hard tonight. And every night they do that, Iran is going to respond in kind.
Yes.
and that's where you get the risk, where even if rationally and strategically you can say, well, the US doesn't want to return to this war because the people in the Pentagon understand the limits. And when you listen to the Joint Chiefs, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs speaking in Congress or wherever it is, you get that sense that they understand that. They can't always speak clearly. But when you're dealing with an irrational, unpredictable, fanatical leadership, as they have in the United States, then even when you're dealing with a very rational, strategic country like Iran, you can't see where things are going. When you have crazy fanatics on one side who are having, weird religious ceremonies in the Oval Office, and on the other side you have a state with a functioning constitution and command structure, you still can't predict what will happen. So
a command structure that has been preparing for this war for almost 2 generations. So I just think that the balls that Iran has to play are many, and I think the ones that the Americans have to play are few, and that's why we've seen what we've seen. The sailors that are on these carriers or on these guided missile destroyers, they're not saying, hey, let's run the blockade and clear it. Like, they know, the people who are on the ground fighting the battle, they know the base is getting destroyed in the region. The Americans know that. And then, of course, there's the Gulf states. And the Gulf states, if this war were to reopen and the Gulf states were to be targeted in this war in a significant way, which is what Iran has promised because of their alliance with the US and Israel, that these Gulf states are in a near existential crisis. I mean, knock the power, when Trump threatens to knock the power grid out, Iran, the first thing Iran will do that in those countries that are right across the water from them. And they are in a virtually existential battle without those resources. These are, countries made in the last 50 years out of the desert that have single points of failure on all kinds of their key infrastructure. Whereas Iran has the opposite of that. They have the most layered and resilient, even if it's not as sophisticated as the US-backed generators in the Gulf countries. They have a layered system. They have a resiliency built into their system that does not exist in the Gulf. The Gulf is a single point of failure on all of their major industrial projects.
And remember that, the Gulf countries, many of them, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, have exported next to nothing since February. And those are economies that need cash flow. They spend vast amounts of money. They have huge armies of migrant workers. They run a very expensive infrastructure and economies, and there's no income. So yes, all of these countries are rich. They have huge amounts of assets, but those assets are not necessarily liquid. So when the cash runs out, you have to start selling assets, and these assets are held, in London, in the United States, and and all the trillions of investment they promised Donald Trump to make in the US. None of that is going to happen. And many of them, their model was, they said that, okay, the energy, the gas, the oil, that's not going to last forever. We can't run economies that are solely based on fossil fuels. So we have to diversify. And they did diversify into tourism, into airlines. So we have the big Gulf airlines, Qatar, Emirates, Etihad, and so on. Dubai is this tourism hub, this investment and financial hub, and so on, real estate. But all of that collapses. Those things don't balance each other. You can't fly an airline, you can't have a big airline world hub in a war zone where airports are getting hit, there's a risk to aviation, and so on. So time is not on their side. And as Jon said, Iran is going to be more resilient no matter what happens, but and I think something, none of this is necessary. There's nothing at stake. Iran wasn't attacking anyone. They could have kept the JCPOA, the 2015 nuclear deal, and abided by it, and everything would be fine now. All of this is driven by a fanatical ideology in the West. It's driven by fanaticism. There's no rational reason for this war.
Thank you, Ali. All right. Before we sign off, there's some more good news that I know you wanted to talk to about something, an activism campaign, especially in Chicago. We talked, was it last week, about the Michigan was it Michigan?
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah. So, okay, right next door in Illinois. Tell us what's happening in Chicago.
Yeah, well, in Illinois, not right next door, but across Lake Michigan.
Across
Lake Michigan,
Midwest zone.
In the Midwest, yes, here in the Midwest, we take that sort of thing very seriously. Yeah, so as you said last week, we talked about how activists in Michigan succeeded in getting the state of Michigan retirement system to divest from Israel bonds, and they're pressuring another state agency that still has some investments to pull out of Israel bonds too. And we talked about that story you can see on screen now by Carrie Zaremba. So if you haven't read that, check it out. And if you're in the chat, hi, Carrie. Well, this week, activists in Illinois have been celebrating a victory as well. For more than a year, a coalition of activists have been working to get Illinois to divest from Israel bonds and from other companies that profit from war and persecution at home. And this includes the U.S. Palestinian Communities Network Chicago chapter, the Anti-War Coalition Chicago, BDS Chicago, and the Illinois Divest from Genocide Network. And for example, in March, they held a big protest at the quarterly meeting of the Illinois State Board of Investment. This week, they announced a significant victory, and you can see that on this post from the U.S. Palestine Communities Network. They say, victory, the Illinois State Board of Investments has divested $33 million from corporations profiting off of genocide, war, and ICE raids. Despite Illinois Treasurer Michael Frerichs asserting that Illinois will remain invested in the genocidal warmongering state of Israel, the Illinois State Board of Investment 2025 annual report shows significant steps towards investment from corporations that have profited off of the destruction, suffering, and imprisonment of families and loved ones both here and in Palestine. This is just the beginning. That's what they say. And also, if you think back to our discussion last week about Michigan, we were talking about, and that's in the article by Carrie Zaramba, how activists are using freedom of information requests to research the connections between their states or their local governments and Israel. And that the Illinois effort did the same. So the coalition says the Illinois State Board of Investments has released a condensed version of their 2025 annual report in an effort to conceal nearly its entire investment portfolio by only listing the top 15 largest investments and omitting 3,071 investments in their public equities portfolio alone. This is in stark contrast to past reports containing a lengthy, if not full, list of investments. Through several Freedom of Information Act requests, the Illinois Divest from Genocide Divestment Network has confirmed that the Illinois State Board of Investment silently divested over $33 million of public funds from corporations that trade in the Israeli shekel and profit from the genocide and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. After over a year of our campaign pressure, ISB no longer holds investments in the Israeli currency, breaking a long-held pattern of investment. So well done to the activists in Illinois, and hopefully we'll be hearing more such news from around the country and around the world.
Yes. Incredible. It's always nice to end on a positive note. And like you say, this is just kind of, nose to the grindstone, filing FOIA requests, looking at previous, tax returns if you're investigating a company, or looking at the investment portfolios of these publicly held pension funds, for example. It's not the most romantic work, but it is really important and critical, and it can be done. And so kudos to the folks at USPCN and the boycott network there. Incredible. Thank you so much, Ali. All right, let's take a look at the website. There is our colleague Dave Cronin's new report, Genocide Lobby Benefits from EU Anti-Racist Fund.
Yes. Yeah, well, so there's a connection to what we spoke about earlier in the show. You remember we watched the video of Ron Lauder, the Zionist billionaire, calling for Mossad and Shin Bet to be sicked on journalists and human rights researchers who expose Israel's crimes. Well, what our colleague David Cronin exposes in this story is that same World Jewish Congress, which is, a explicitly pro-Israel Zionist group, is receiving significant funding from the European Union's anti-racism fund. Imagine that. It's just another example of the utter corruption that these unelected, unpopular, undemocratic elites are up to with other people's money.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, give that a read. That's in our Lobby Watch section on electronicintifada.net. We have a few new features from our writers in Gaza. And
we have a wonderful piece from Khaled El-Qirshali in Gaza. The Hajj period just was observed, where Muslims from all over the world observe the obligation to make pilgrimage, and he's writing about the fact that Palestinians in Gaza excluded from this for many years. They were able to go on the pilgrimage, but not now, and what that means to people who hope to be able to make the Hajj while they're still alive, because nobody in Gaza knows what will happen the next day. There's very much that feeling there. So a very poignant story. It was very moving to read that. And there's a piece that was just published while we were on air by 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 which I haven't read yet. It was literally published while we've been on air, so maybe we'll read from that next week. But I do want to point out this piece by Jody McIntyre, which was also published today. Little change likely on Palestine if Starmer is ousted. Keir Starmer, of course, the British Prime Minister. I haven't read this piece yet, but I love Jody McIntyre's reporting on British politics, especially sharp. I don't know if you have anything to say about this one, Asa.
Yeah, it's another good piece by Jody. He is doing some really good reporting on the pro-Israel lobby, and this is about the possibility in the British government that there's likely to be a change in Prime Minister because there's internal dissension against Keir Starmer by people from the right of the party, like Red Streeting, but also people like Andy Burnham, who's the man in the photo there, in the center of the photo there, who seems to be likely to be the next Labour Prime Minister. But there won't be a general election. There would just be possibly be an election, an internal election within a kind of primary, if you will, that where the Labour Party members would choose the next leader of the party and by default the next Prime Minister. And it is likely to be Andy Burnham, who is somebody who's considered to be from the soft left of the party, supposedly in terms of domestic policies. But Jodie's article here looks at the fact that he too is pretty much in hog to the Israel lobby, like all of the other Labour ministers.
Of course. All right. Thank you for that. Again, that's Jody McIntyre's feature. And there is still so much that we published in the last week. So go to electronicintifada.net to read our new features and reports and analyses, book reviews. And we can't do any of this. We can't publish these. We can't pay our writers. We can't produce this live stream without the support of people like you. Our readers and viewers and listeners are the ones who keep this entire publication afloat. So, Ali, who do we have to thank this week?
Well, once again, people have been donating during the program, which we really appreciate. It just that enthusiasm, that support, that is really, really touching. So thank you, Maria, Jean, Mark, Robert, Onur. Çok teşekkür ederiz. I know Onur is in Turkey watching, so I hope he doesn't mind me shouting out to him. And Lawrence, just some over the last few days and since last week, we've had gifts from Lawrence, from Osama, from Norman, from Sebastian. We have monthly donors, people who are giving month in, month out, and that's just so appreciated because it allows us to really plan and to be confident in knowing that we're going to be strong and have the support to do this work. So thank you, Yolande, Emmett, Jody, Maureen, Wesley, Daniel, Martin, Ian, and Kareem. Thanks to each and every one of you. And if anyone wants to make a gift, you can go to electronicintifada.net and click that donate now button at the top right, or there are links below. But just remember, only make a gift if you can. And there's lots of us who are in the fortunate position to be able to. And that means that you help us to share this information with everyone in the world, including people who cannot donate. And that's fine, because that's how we do this. We do this together. All the work we do, all the incredible analysis and news we got from Nora at the beginning of the show, John's reporting, all the investigative work and reporting we do on the website, that is all free for everyone forever.
That's right. Well, thank you again, everyone, so much. I want to thank, of course, Tamara Nassar, our director and producer. Thank you so much, Tamara. Thank you to Ali Gerzon for social media production. Thanks to Pierre Loisel for radio production. Thanks to all of our colleagues at the Electronic Intifada, all of our contributors. And on behalf of myself, John, Ali, Asa, and Tamara, thank you all, and we will see you next week.